Have you ever been in a conversation that suddenly takes a turn and you're left thinking, wait a minute, was that really necessary? Maybe it was a family member at the dinner table, a neighbor making a snide remark, or even someone at church saying something that just didn't sit right. You weren't looking for a fight. You were just being you, showing up, sharing, living your life. And out of nowhere, someone hits you with a comment that stings. It happens more than we like to admit, especially as we grow older. People think we're more patient, or that we'll let it slide, or that somehow we're less likely to speak up for ourselves. But here's the truth. You deserve respect, not just in your home, but in every room you walk into. And when that doesn't happen, you need tools. Not to argue, not to lash out, but to stand your ground with calm, quiet confidence. So today, we're going to talk about something simple but powerful. How to respond when someone says something rude or disrespectful to you. And no, you don't have to match their energy. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't even have to explain yourself. But you can say something, or choose not to, in a way that keeps your dignity intact and leaves the other person thinking twice the next time. Let's start with the very first tool I want you to keep in your back pocket. It's a phrase that sounds gentle, but it holds a lot of power. The phrase is, "Did you mean?" Just those 3 words. Did you mean? Here's why this matters. When someone says something sharp or offhanded, your instinct might be to fire back. But instead, this phrase invites a pause. It puts the responsibility back on the other person to clarify their intent. It's not aggressive. It's not accusing. It's simply asking, what exactly were you trying to say just now? Imagine you're at a family gathering. You arrive a few minutes late, not on purpose, just because traffic was heavy, or you needed a little more time getting out the door. And someone says, "Well, look who finally decided to show up." Now you could snap back. You could remind them how often they've been late. You could point out that you're not here for their approval. But all of that pulls you into a game you don't want to play. Instead, you pause, look at them calmly, and say, "Did you mean for that to sound rude?" You're not yelling. You're not accusing. You're simply shining a light on their words and asking if that's really what they meant to do. 9 times out of 10, people will backpedal. "Oh, I didn't mean it like that," they'll say. Or, "I was just joking." And whether they were or weren't, you've done something important. You made them aware. You made them think. And most importantly, you did it without losing your peace. That phrase works in everyday conversations, but it's especially useful in writing, emails, texts, even those short messages that feel a little too cold. Maybe someone sends you a 1-word reply, K. Or they respond to a thoughtful message with something that sounds dismissive like sure or whatever. That's when you can gently write back, "Did you mean for that to sound short?" No lecture, no overthinking. Just a quick, clear question that gives them a chance to correct themselves. This is about standing in your truth without making a scene. And I know, for many of us, speaking up at all can feel like too much. We were raised to let it go, to keep the peace. But here's what I've learned, especially in these later chapters of life. Peace isn't about silence. It's about protecting your heart. It's about knowing when to speak with kindness but firmness. And asking, "Did you mean?" is one of the kindest, firmest things you can say. Sometimes, though, it's not what people say directly. It's what they hint at. Those side comments that aren't said to your face but meant for you anyway. That's what we'll talk about next. Because rudeness doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers from across the room. And when it does, you still deserve the tools to handle it with grace. Now, let's talk about those moments that are a little harder to pin down. Not the obvious digs, not the clear insults, But the comments that come wrapped in a smile, slipped in under the radar, you know the kind. Passive-aggressive remarks. They might sound polite to everyone else, but you can feel the sting underneath. These are the moments where someone says something like, "Well, I guess it's nice that you finally came around to help, even though you've been helping all along." Or, "Must be nice not having anything to do all day," as if your retirement means your time isn't valuable anymore. These comments don't just catch you off guard, they wear you down over time. And what makes them tricky is that if you react too strongly, you end up looking like the one who overreacted. That's why it's so important to handle passive-aggressive comments with calm awareness. Not to attack, but to gently pull back the curtain and make the person think about what they just said. Here's one of my favorite ways to do that. When someone makes a passive-aggressive remark, respond with something like, "It sounds like there's more to that." Or even, "Are you doing okay today?" Now, you're not accusing. You're not shaming. You're simply inviting a little honesty into the room. What you're doing, in the most graceful way possible, is saying, "I heard that. I see what you're trying to do, and I'm not going to ignore it." But you're also leaving space for them to shift their tone or explain themselves. Let's say you're at a family barbecue and one of your relatives, maybe a daughter-in-law or a cousin, says something like, "Well, we all have our way of doing things. Some people just take a little longer to catch on." And everyone laughs lightly, but it feels pointed. You know it was aimed at you. You could freeze. You could laugh along and stew about it later. Or you could look at them and say, "It sounds like that meant something more." And then pause. Just let that silence sit. What happens next is powerful. You've taken the spotlight off of yourself and put it back where it belongs, on their words. Most people don't want to be seen as mean-spirited or unkind, especially in public. And that simple phrase can make them take a step back and rethink how they speak to you next time. Another gentle way to respond is to ask, "Was that meant for me?" Or, "Is something bothering you?" Again, you're not accusing. You're being curious. And curiosity is a powerful thing, especially when it's calm and honest. Now I know, sometimes people aren't trying to be cruel. They're hurting. They're stressed. Or maybe they just don't have the words to ask for what they need. That doesn't excuse the behavior, but it can help you respond instead of react. And that difference, response over reaction, is where your real power lives. You don't have to raise your voice to raise the standard in the conversation. You don't have to shame someone to protect your boundaries. A simple question, spoken gently, can do more than any long explanation ever could. I've talked to a lot of people over the years who say, "But I'm tired of always being the bigger person." And I get that. Truly, I do. But here's what I remind them, and maybe you need to hear it too. Being the bigger person isn't about letting people walk over you. It's about walking away taller, with your peace still intact. It's about knowing who you are, even when others don't see it yet. You've lived too long, seen too much, and loved too deeply to get dragged into a petty back and forth. Passive-aggressive behavior is often just someone testing your limits. So show them where your limits are, not with harshness, but with clarity. And one of the clearest signals you can ever give is silence. Not the kind that's cold or punishing, but the kind that says, "I'm not here to play that game." So let's talk about that next. Because when you master the pause, you change the entire conversation. Let's talk about silence. Now, I don't mean the kind of silence that comes from feeling frozen or unsure. I'm talking about intentional, controlled silence, the kind that speaks louder than words ever could. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing. Picture this. You're sitting at a dinner table. Maybe it's Thanksgiving, maybe it's someone's birthday. There's laughter, chatter, and then, out of nowhere, someone slips in a remark. Maybe it's about your age, maybe it's about how you always have something to say. Or maybe it's something as small as a side comment about how you're dressed. It catches you off guard. For a moment, the air shifts. You feel your body tense, your jaw clench, and you think, I should say something. And maybe you could, but instead, you pause. You simply look at the person, not with a glare, not with a smirk, just calmly, quietly. 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds of silence. Those 4 seconds aren't just empty space. They are a message, and it says everything. It says, I heard what you said. I'm aware of what you tried to do, and I'm not giving you the reaction you were hoping for. It's the emotional version of stepping out of the boxing ring and saying, I don't need to fight to prove anything. What makes this work so well is that most people expect, or even want, a reaction. They want you flustered. They want you to stumble or get defensive. And when you give them none of that, it forces them to sit with their own words. Your silence becomes a mirror. They're the only ones still talking, and suddenly, that's uncomfortable. For them, there's a strength in restraint. It's a kind of wisdom that says, I don't need to win this moment. I'm already winning by walking through life with self-respect. Now, if you're like a lot of folks I talk to, you might be thinking, but won't I seem weak if I say nothing? Won't they think I'm letting them get away with it? Here's the truth. Silence, when used correctly, doesn't make you look weak. It makes you look unbothered. And in a world that's constantly trying to get a rise out of people, being unbothered is powerful. You're not ignoring what happened. You're acknowledging it without giving it life. And if you want to take it one step further, here's a little mindset shift that can help. Imagine the rude comment as a piece of paper someone is trying to hand you. They're waving it in front of your face, hoping you'll grab it and do something with it. Argue, defend yourself, justify your actions. But instead of taking that paper, you gently turn to the side and place it down on a small table beside you. You don't even read it. You don't need to. Because you know what's written on it isn't worth your energy. You can think of that little table as your internal counsel, a quiet space in your mind where you can say, I see this, I acknowledge this, but I'm not carrying it with me. And then you go on with your meal, your walk, your day. The beautiful thing about getting older is that you gain perspective. You start to realize how precious your time, your energy, your peace really are. You've been through hard seasons. You've fought enough battles. Not every rude comment deserves your attention. Not every jab needs a jab back. Sometimes the most mature, most graceful thing you can do is nothing. Now, I want to be clear. This kind of silence doesn't mean you let people mistreat you. It means you choose your response carefully. It means you recognize the difference between someone who made a mistake and someone who's trying to start something. It means you trust yourself enough to know that not everything requires your reaction. Because when you stop giving your power away, when you stop letting other people's comments determine how you feel, you start living from a deeper place, a place of peace, a place of confidence, a place where you walk into a room and don't need to prove a thing. And that, my friend, is what we're aiming for. So the next time someone says something rude or makes a disrespectful remark, whether it's in person, online, at a family gathering, or just passing by, take a breath. Ask yourself, is this worth my peace? Is this worth my energy? Sometimes the answer will be yes, and you'll speak up with grace and calm. Sometimes you'll ask, did you mean for that to come across that way? Other times you'll gently call it out for what it is. It sounds like something else is going on here. But other times, you'll simply look, breathe, and say nothing. And that's the power of silence. You've made it this far, and I want to pause for a moment. Not to recap, but to acknowledge something important. If you're watching this video, chances are you've experienced those small but painful moments where someone crossed the line with their words, their tone, or just their attitude. And you're not looking to argue, you're not looking to get even. You're just looking for a way to protect your peace without losing your voice. That alone shows strength. It shows wisdom. It shows a desire to rise above the noise, to live with intention, and to choose dignity, even when others don't offer it to you. Now you've got the tools. You've learned how to calmly ask, "Did you mean?" and let that question open up space for reflection, not just for the other person, but for yourself. You've learned how to spot those subtle jabs, the quiet digs wrapped in a smile, and how to respond with honest, curious phrases like, "It sounds like there's more to that." You don't have to expose anyone, but you're not letting it slide past either. And you've learned that silence, when chosen with care, isn't weakness. It's wisdom. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is to not engage at all, to hold your peace like the treasure it is and walk away taller than you arrived. This isn't about winning arguments. It's not about being clever or sharp. It's about holding on to who you are, your self-respect, your values, your calm, even when the world tries to pull it out of you. And here's what I want you to remember, especially if you've ever felt like you were too sensitive, or too emotional, or that you needed to just toughen up. Your feelings are valid. Your instincts are sharp. You've lived a long life, and you know when something feels off. You're not overreacting. You're choosing how to respond. And that choice is everything. So the next time someone tries to get under your skin, pause. Breathe. Choose the response that honors your peace. Maybe you speak up with a calm question. Maybe you gently call it out. Maybe you say nothing at all. But whatever you do it from that steady place inside you. That place that knows who you are and doesn't need to prove it to anyone. Because here's the truth. You're not here to play small. You're not here to get dragged into someone else's drama. You're here to live boldly, with grace and strength and wisdom. And your voice or your silence can be part of that. If this message spoke to you today, I hope you'll take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me about a time when you handled a rude comment with grace, or even a time you wish you had. We learn from each other, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you'd like more content like this, real talk, practical wisdom, and encouragement for this season of life, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to the channel, Strong Elderly Life. This is your space. A place where age is strength and your voice still matters. Thank you for spending your time here with me today. Here's to choosing peace, standing tall, and living your best life at any age. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.